Hello guys, it's Ryan here with Obvious Man. Once again, today we're going to be doing another manga review. Today we're going to be looking at Juana and the Dragonewt'S 7 Kingdoms, volumes 1, 2, and 3, which is a complete collection of the series. This is everything that there is for the series. And it's pretty enjoyable. It's not my favorite, but I did overall like it. There was a lot of things here that I really appreciated and some things that I didn't really love. Mostly the length. So, yeah, the story is written by Kiyohisa Tanaka. I think I said that wrong in the first impressions review. I do apologize. But it is Kiyohisa Tanaka. It's published by 7 Seas, as you guys can see right there. And this isn't necessarily one of their early publishings, but it is definitely feels quite old compared to a lot of the stuff that you can get right now. And I think this first volume was actually released in 2017. So it's been about 6 years since the series was published, right? So, yeah, the demographic here is teen. I mentioned before in the first impressions review that I'm not really sure what the actual Japanese demographic is. It is from this thing called Mag Game or something like that. This magazine or this website called Mag Game or something. And I couldn't really find what the demographic for them was, but I speculate it's either seinen or shoujo, and so teen feels like a fine assessment for the American audience. There really isn't anything here that I can honestly say is like difficult for children, but I mean, there is kind of some depth to the story that, you know, might not be appreciated by children, even though they might like everything else about the story. So, yeah. The genres here are fantasy, post-apocalyptic, and it is a type of travel log story. So you follow a group of characters as they travel from one place to the other and experience things as they go and eventually reach a destination. So basically, most escort mission type shows and movies that you're used to, like Lone Wolf and Cub, the Red Sonja series that's basically like that from America and Dolpho, The Mandalorian, a bunch of the episodes from that other Star Wars show, what's it called? The one with the Clone Force 99, the Bad Batch. Sorry, that's what it's called. Last of Us, you know, stuff like that. Basically anything with Pedro Pascal in it. It's a type of travel log type story. And in terms of adaptation, does not have one. It'd be kind of a cute movie, actually. It would be kind of an interesting kind of Ghibli-esque movie, but I just don't think that there is enough interest in this to really warrant any adaptation now or in the future. So yeah, ratings wise, this is like a 3.5 out of 5, maybe 4 out of 5. I think 4 out of 5 is too much, but a 3 feels like too little. So we'll go 3.5 out of 5 or a 7 out of 10. There's some value in this. I really appreciated some elements of it, but others I felt were not that great. And it is what it is, right? So yeah, the premise here is that the world was inherited by these lizard people. I can't remember what they're called. Guardianes or something like that. Which I'm guess is supposed to be guardianes, which is Spanish for guardians. But I'm not really sure. It kind of makes sense actually in terms of the context of the story, but I don't really remember how it was spelled. So yeah, and basically we follow one of these lizard people called Ned, which is this guy right there, and he is a scavenger. He's kind of this he's kind of at the bottom of the social ladder. He's a carnivore that doesn't eat meat, and so he remains small, but he still looks very much like a carnivorous creature. And so the herbivores that exist in this place, the other half of the population, don't really want to interact with him, but they make fun of him for being so small because of his own preferences. And so he is kind of this fish out of water type character. He's a scavenger. He ends up finding this little girl called Juana, and he takes care of her. He takes her in, and they go on an adventure. And throughout their adventure, a lot of perils happen and a lot of hijinks ensue. And so that's basically what the story is about. So yeah, the plot line here starts with the introduction to the Mornades, which are humans, ancient humans, an ancient race that is revered by these lizard people to an extent. And these lizard people, the Guardianes, now own the world, now are the dominant species in this world. Ned is a scavenger, like I said. He finds an egg. Juana, honestly, Juana should be the the right name, but you know, it is what it is. She hatches from this egg, and Nied takes her in. He gives her some clothing. He helps her kind of orient herself. He takes her with him, and they eventually go talk to Nied's caretaker or master, who's named Zedan, and they find out what she is. She is one of these ancient people, and she is also interested in going to a place that sounds like Spain. It's like based on Spain. It's called Sipan or something like that, and it kind of makes sense because she speaks Spanish, but not really. It's whatever. And so they have a destination, and they prepare for this travel that they're embarking on by having this character called Ronnie make a little astronaut suit for Juana. And well, then they move on. The journey starts, and they end up going for a while. Eventually, they have to stop, and their first stop is actually kind of a morbid situation here, where Juana and Nied end up in this place that is abandoned, or mostly abandoned. There is one person that lives here, but he is basically about to die. He is ready to die, and thankfully, Nied and Juana showed up at the right time to provide him some level of interaction, some connection before he passed on. This also then gets explained as a cultural thing, that these lizard people go through, this death cave situation, phenomena that not everyone goes through, but some people do. And this guy obviously seemed to be one of them. And basically it is a mortality check, I guess. It's like, hey, we can die. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, right? Basically, that's what that part of the story entails. And then eventually they move on. They arrive at this cool city, which I'm guessing is the second kingdom that they're in. We don't actually keep track of the kingdoms, but I do think that they actually end up going through 7 of them by the end, or they go through 5 of them because they started at one and they end at the other. So they go through 5 kingdoms, I think. And the first one is this big city that they're in. And Nied is a very naive guy. He's only 15 years old. We don't really learn that until later, but of course it makes sense. He's a kid, and he takes responsibility for this other child that is even smaller than him, right? So yeah, he basically gets all his shit stolen by this chick called Ziola, and then Juana gets kidnapped by this ringleader circus guy who basically collects weird things and weird people. And so she gets kidnapped. Then there's kind of a situation there where Juana meets all of the people that live in the circus, and she connects with this guy who kind of has this like emotional, stunted kind of vibe to him, and they connect, and so he helps her. And while this is happening, Nied and Zoila sneak into the circus. Then Nied has a confrontation with the circus guy, and they eventually save Juana through a kind of convoluted but kind of fun process. And they keep traveling, they move on to the next area, and eventually they end up in another kingdom where apparently Nied's family is from, or they actually ended up going there after some time. And so now Nied has to deal with the fact that, hey, my family is here, and I have a lot of pent-up issues with them. So I kind of want to avoid this, but the reality of the situation is that he can't, and so he has to deal with it. We get a lot of explanation about why he is the way he is, what kind of happens, and the effect that Juana is having on Nied, which is a very positive effect, right? There is this kind of understood element of like, hey, when you get responsibility, you grow, right? Which is maybe not the best thing to tell kids, but also maybe not the worst thing. It can help, and it can also be kind of bad for you. But in the case of Nied, it works, right? So yeah. What happens then is that they end up with his family. They end up doing some kind of cute, mostly character building type stuff, and then they move on to the next area. And so they end up in the 4th kingdom, I think. Maybe at this point they have reached the 5th kingdom. Like I said, it's not a really continuous like thing where they specify, hey, we're in kingdom 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It doesn't matter. Eventually they end up in this place that's the scrapyard kingdom. And Nied gets help by these cool like mechanic dudes to help him fix his bike. He gets some energy magnetic thingies into his bike, so his bike now works because it used to run on gasoline, but they don't have any anymore. So he's kind of been using it like a scooter. And so with their bike, they can speed up their journey, and eventually they end up going to Sipan, and they encounter this giant creature thing that kind of is trying to hunt them. They end up meeting with the circus guy again, and then they end up falling into a pit that turns out to be the entrance to this secret observatory laboratory type thing, where these ancient lizard people are kind of keeping the secrets of the reality of their world and helping what happens to be an incubation thing for humanity. And so Nied gets the lowdown on the situation, and it turns out that, you know, things are not what they seem, but they're not as bad as they seem. And there's a certain level of love and connection that Nied and Juana have developed. And so they decide to remain together. They eventually learn to communicate with each other. It's a very cute scene, but it's very, very rushed. And at this point, I kind of lost my love for the series because I really loved the first volume. The second one was fine. I knew that it was going to end abruptly, but it wasn't handled well. And it kind of sucks because I feel like there's a lot of value to the series. There would have been a lot of very beautiful moments in the series that were just cut short for whatever reason. And it kind of sucks. And so I am left unsatisfied by the end of the story. But overall, I do think that it's enjoyable. It would be a really cool Ghibli-esque movie, honestly. I do think it would have that, as long as they kind of workshop the ending a little bit and make it a little bit more enjoyable, right? But eventually it does end up with a very cute scene to finish off the series, and it's fine. It was not ultimately very satisfying, but it worked out. I will keep this in my collection for a few years. I think it is something that I will probably return to eventually, if nothing else, to recommend a short series that isn't going to take up too much of your time or money to kind of collect and enjoy, right? So yeah, in terms of characters, we have Nied. Actually, his name is spelled Nid, N-I-D, but everyone makes, or Juana at least, makes a very concerted effort to say Nied with a Y and an E, and so I'm guessing that is the correct pronunciation, but, you know, that's just what I'm going with. I'm not really sure. We get introduced to Zoila again, Zedan, who's the old master character, and then the circus dude, and I have no idea what his name is. I don't really care. And there's a few other characters that show up eventually, but most of them don't really get names, or they just get like placeholder names like Big Bro or Mom and Dad, and, you know, stuff like that. It ultimately doesn't really matter. The two, maybe three characters that matter here are Nied, Juana, and Zedan, or Zoila, depending on which one you care about more. But for me, it's all about Nied and Juana, and I think that's fine. I enjoy the characterization that we get for all of the characters that we do get some characterization for, but ultimately they're not that important. I like Juana the best. In terms of world building, it's a little bit hit or miss. Like on one hand, the lizard people and the historical context of the story, the way that it's kind of developing its fake world, I 100% love. I really agree with it. I think it's cool and it's fun and it's interesting, and it's very cool to have the situation where humanity is the ancient lost civilization instead of like this weird alien one, right? I really enjoy that aspect. I think that's really, really cool. However, Juana's Spanish speaking is part of the world building, and it is insanely inconsistent. Like sometimes things that she says don't even actually feel like Spanish. They feel like Spanish, but they're actually just gibberish. And I don't like that, because this is clearly trying to have the character have Spanish dialogue. So find someone that can write it and make sure that you do it well, because maybe the vast majority of your basic American white person is not going to know anything, and they're going to be like, okay, whatever. But the people that do know Spanish that read this, which might be more than you think, are going to be very confused or annoyed by what the situation is. It's the same thing that I explained in my Skull Island review, where episode 7 was probably the best episode of the series, but because of the cringy way that the character spoke Spanish, it really ruined the experience. And so I think that there's an element of that here, especially early on in the story and then near the end of the story. I'm not really sure if it was the Japanese author that didn't really know anything and just kind of wanted to include it. And, you know, in that sense, in Japan, it doesn't really matter because how many Spanish speakers are there in Japan? That's fine. I understand it from that aspect. But when you translate it to English, you know, note, hey, the author in Japan didn't actually write this correctly, but we decided to do so, and then fix the issues so that your American audience, which includes a lot of Hispanic people, can enjoy this fully. And that is ultimately one of the biggest issues that I have with this story. It's that the Spanish is not used correctly. And if they would have said something like, Juana is a child and she doesn't know the language correctly, I would have been fine with it, except that some of her word choices are too advanced for a child to know. And so it's this really weird thing where sometimes she speaks perfectly and other times she's just saying gibberish, and it doesn't make sense because she's clearly as intelligent as Nied, and she just chooses not to speak for whatever reason for most of the story, right? So I was kind of annoyed by that, clearly. But everything else was fine. Of course, the length of it hurt because ultimately there was just kind of this big lore dump at the end where it's like, okay, we're gonna be done, so here's all the information you need to finish the story. Okay, goodbye, hands clean, let's go. And that kind of sucks, but it is what it is. It's kind of expected for these types of series, right? So yeah, in terms of artwork and fan service, I really enjoy the artwork. I think it's really, really cute. However, there are at least 7 times while reading these 3 issues that I was very confused about what I was looking at, because the story has this very kind of interesting, kind of sketchy, very kind of rough vibe to it. It feels refined, but it's not exactly perfect, right? And then there's these moments of emotion where there's these interesting things happening and things that are kind of going around. And then the characters just lose definition, and they're doing something important that is being referenced by the text, and I have no clue what that's supposed to be because the artwork doesn't convey that clearly, and that is a very annoying thing. There is I don't know, the fact that I remember it happening a specific number of times and that every time it did, it frustrated me to no end is a pretty big negative. And so that is a secondary massive negative here. But as you can tell, it's not really the story that's a problem. It's the stuff that is part of the story, the elements that are secondary to the story that are kind of affecting me the most. So that's why I'm not giving it too harsh of a rating, because ultimately they don't ruin the story for your average person. They're ruining the story for me specifically, right? So it is what it is. But yeah, very cute art style when it works. When it's losing definition, it's really, really confusing, and there's no fan service at all. But Juana is a cute little girl who shows off cute little outfits, and so if you're someone that's offended by that, you're gonna have issues with it, regardless of whether it's actually fan servicey or not, right? So yeah, in terms of a rating, it's a 3.5 out of 5. Like I said, I'm sad it's not a little bit longer, and I'm sad that there's so many secondary issues here because they tank the enjoyment for me specifically. Your average person might not have these issues. If you're an average American, which is probably going to be a white person or someone that doesn't speak Spanish, you're probably not going to have any issues with the Spanish aspect. To you, it's going to seem like, yeah, this works. It doesn't matter what it says because I don't understand it anyway, so whatever. But the artwork, I think it is going to be a little bit of an issue for other people. So there you go. That's my thoughts on Juana and the Dragonewt'S 7 Kingdoms. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave a like, subscribe, let me know what you thought, and let me know what you think about this series overall. Thank you guys very much for watching, and see you guys later.